Hi, and welcome back to another episode. This one's going to be a little bit different. I've got Emily Wilkinson back. Emily is a psychologist, an award winning poet, and founder of Flourishing Space. And she came on a little while ago and interviewed me about my burnout story. And I've got her back here again today to interview me again. So I think you're going to really like the episode. Emily is a great interviewer, and I should perhaps consider her as a co host one day. Anyway, let's get started with the episode. Thank you, Emily, so much for coming back on and for doing this episode with me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Hayley. That's an absolute pleasure. So, we're going to be talking a bit more about your book today, which is really exciting. As you know, I've actually been reading the book for a second time, which has been so lovely and been uncovering all sorts of extra parts that I hadn't maybe picked up on as strongly the first time. So, I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I guess maybe going back to the beginning a little bit, what first prompted you to write the book?
Well, I was actually writing a different book at the time. I 4 years ago, I'd started writing a book on self-care for therapists, and it just didn't feel like the right book. I'd been talking to a publisher, they kind of wanted a slightly different book. So what I did is I put things down and didn't touch it. And then January at the start of last year, I thought to myself, well, I can write a book on self-care for business owners. So I started writing that and I was about 10,000 words in. And the title of the book that I did end up writing just kept coming to me and wouldn't leave me alone. I just kept hearing this from self-neglect to self-compassion. So I mentioned it to three different people, and each of them, when I told them about the title, said, "Oh my gosh, that's given me goosebumps." So I figured that that was perhaps the book I was supposed to write. So I got on and wrote it.
Wow, incredible. Almost like you were being guided to write this book.
Yeah, it felt like the book chose me.
Absolutely. Wow. So that's pretty record time, I imagine, for writing a book.
Yeah,
Sounds like it was quite quick, like relatively.
yeah, I started writing it mid-March, and I got the first draft to my publisher end of July. And then after that, I ended up adding 20,000 more words. I didn't actually realize that I'd done that. But I think as I was reading through it, I was like, oh, actually, I just want to expand on that, or I want to add this little bit in. So I think we pretty much were at the sort of final getting things ready for print sort of time around the sort of September, October, and we went to pre-orders in November.
Oof, just wow. Wow. Were you surprised by that?
Yeah, I was because I'd done myself like an Excel spreadsheet to try and keep a track of word count. And when I looked back on it, I didn't have like a process. Some people sort of say, you need a process, you should sit and write every day. That wasn't my process. I wrote when I wrote, and sometimes I didn't write for maybe a week. But when I look back, I actually wrote the book in 16 sittings. So I was pretty surprised by that.
Wow. How did it feel at the time when you were actually writing?
I just felt like I was in flow a lot
Mm.
of the time. I'd start writing, and then before I knew it, I'd been writing for a few hours and there was lots of content there. So it's been a really, really lovely process. A lot of people, I'd heard sort of people say, by the time you finish writing a book, you don't want anything to do with the book, you're sick of the book. And that's just not been the experience for me, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, wow. And it's interesting, yeah, using that word flow, because I feel like the voice in the book does flow so beautifully. And I wonder if that's partly because of that process and the way it just, yeah, flowed from you. And I feel like it sounds, when I'm reading it, I can almost hear you saying it out loud to me.
Yeah, I've had a few people say that.
Mm.
Either people who know me personally or people who've listened to my podcast say it's like having me sitting there with you, kind of reading the book,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
is lovely. And there will be an audio book coming, so that should be out in a few weeks. So that's exciting as well.
Oh, fantastic. That's really great. So thinking about that, were there any chapters that felt, I don't know, easier or more difficult to write than the others?
I think probably including my story in the book was not difficult, but I think kind of choosing how much of my story to share and what to not share for two reasons. One was about, you know, protecting my own privacy and only sharing what I want to share out into the world. I'm a big believer in like nobody's entitled to your story. So we get to choose how much of ourselves we do want to share publicly. But also, the book isn't about me. So I didn't want it to be too much of my story and go for too long, because the book really isn't about me. It's about the reader and how they can engage with the book and do the reflections and make the changes in their own lives. So that was probably the one that I actually wrote most of that chapter about myself last.
Mm.
I kind of wrote a little bit, but then I came back to it at the end and really kind of decided what I wanted to put in the book once I knew what was already in the book.
Yeah, and in that way, that's so considered. And when you were writing it, you were considering the whole scope of the book and everything that you were saying. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds important. And so, did anything about that part surprise you, or were there things that you'd forgotten that kind of, I don't know, resurfaced, or not necessarily in that section, but maybe other sections too?
Um, Nothing that surprised me particularly. There was times during that, because I have a history of domestic violence, I've got a history of mental health issues. There was times during that part of the book that I was very mindful to connect with my compassionate self a lot and really take care of my own needs, which when you're writing a book called From Self-Neglect to Self-Compassion, it's all about, how can we take better care of ourselves and meet our needs. It was a lovely constant reminder for me to do that. And there was something really quite lovely for me to reflect on my journey and where I came from, what I've been through, and where I am now. So that was actually quite a lovely process as well. I'd done some journal reflections along the way, which I may share at some point in my social media or wherever, maybe write a little article or something. But that was nice to sort of have that reflection of the process, how I was feeling, and if anything was showing up, and how I kind of navigated that as well.
Yeah, goodness. So you were really actually walking the talk while you were writing. Yeah. It's interesting because there are some things in the book that I imagine, could be very raw and certainly very real. And at the same time, there's this real sense when you're reading that that was shared in such an intentional way and coming from a place of reflection and a way to, I guess, connect with the reader, maybe. Was
Yeah,
that?
thank you. Yeah, it was the I've tried to be as intentional as possible with that, and really kind of sharing things based on me believing that would be helpful for somebody to know that about me. Like I said before, I didn't want this book to be about me, but I wanted to not only use my professional knowledge and wisdom and training of the concepts in the book, but also my lived experience, but the parts of my lived experience that I can share because I've healed from them. I think that's really important, is I've done the work to process the things that have happened. And I chose them because I believed that there will be other people who would read that and see themselves in it. And one, hopefully feel some validation from that and some understanding and feel seen, but also to offer hope that things can be different for people as well. That's always been a big one for me, is like if I can offer some hope and perhaps some inspiration to somebody that no matter where they are right now, things can change, then that felt important to me as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And I guess too, just the way that people do really connect with the human who's
Mm.
writing. So yeah, that definitely came through. Did you notice when you were, I guess, talking about your younger self? Did you get a sense of your future self and what I know you do talk about your future self from time to time? Did you get a sense of what your future self might say while you were writing?
Well, my future, I felt like I was connected to both past versions of me and future versions of me. But one of the things that would come through quite strongly for me was the book's already written, Hayley, and there's people waiting for it. So, you know, it's like in the future, this book is written and
Yeah.
there's people wanting it. So that kind of, I guess, helped motivate me to keep going. I had a thing on my whiteboard with a similar saying to that.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that there's a sense of pride in that as well, particularly for me, having dropped out of school and spent a lot of time struggling with that aspect of my life. To have gone through and done the things that I've done and got my PhD and built my career in psychology and then made a very intentional decision to leave that and focus on my business now, but to also have gone through this process and written a book. I do feel proud of that. And also, when I was a teenager, I started writing a book when I was in school. I think it was like a romance. I was going to write a romance novel.
Yeah.
And I had a really supportive English teacher who had said to me, if you want me to read anything, I'm happy to read it. And at the time, I wasn't able to welcome in that compassionate support from that person. So I just was like, well, I'm not going to do that. And I let it go and didn't do it. So I think the younger part of me is pretty happy as well that there's a book out there with her name on too.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine that teacher would be pretty proud as well. Incredible. So, yeah, and I love what you were saying about the future self kind of already knowing it's happened.
Mm.
And so connecting in with that sounds really, yeah, helpful apart from anything else.
Yeah.
And there's, as well as the text of the book, there are some incredible exercises that you take people through, take the readers through. So obviously the written exercises, those beautiful questions, which I know I've mentioned to you before off air, how useful I found those multiple reflective questions, but also the guided meditations that you offer as part of the book. Are just incredible. And I guess I thought of that because of the future self. And one of my favorite meditations in there is the future self meditation.
Oh, fantastic.
How did you go about choosing which meditations to put in and I guess
Um, Gosh,
writing them?
that's a good question. Again, I think just whatever felt like it fitted with the chapter of the book. There's eight of the guided meditations throughout the book, some of which I've had written for quite a long time. And I just really wanted to do something. I wanted it to be an experience. I knew from the start I didn't want this to just be a book. I wanted it to be an experience, and I wanted to be able to offer something where the reader felt like I was supporting them through the process. And there's the manuscript, or if you call it a manuscript, the script of the meditations where people can read them themselves. And then I was like, oh, but what if they could actually access me taking them through a meditation? I could actually be there supporting them through that. And that's what I chose to do. So easy access with a QR code. And then I guide you through the meditations. But one of the reasons I did both was, and I mentioned this in the book, that you may like to read this and record yourself reading this meditation so you can play it back to yourself. And that's because I found that really helpful when I was learning this, to actually hear my own voice reading or speaking the meditations to me. So it was like helping me practice having this compassionate voice that was actually my own. So I've given both options in the book. So hopefully that's helpful for people.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, it's kind of that invitation. There's such a strong sense in the book of invitation
Mm.
rather than, I don't know, dictating how things should be.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want it, I did not want it to be like a prescriptive if you want a thriving life, these are the 5 steps you've got to take to get there. Like, I did not want it to be that at all. I really wanted it to honor that whilst we are very similar as human beings, we're all very different as well. And what works for somebody doesn't necessarily work for someone else. So these are invitations and suggestions that hopefully will land well for people, or that people can take and go, well, actually, it doesn't quite work like that, but maybe I could adapt it into a way that it would work for me. So I love that you said that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's not quite like a choose your own adventure, but it's almost like a choose your own adventure vibe in the sense that you're taking the reader through such a journey of transformation, and along the way there are so many opportunities that they can choose to pick up on or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Hmm. So just to change the tone slightly, I was curious with all the chapters that you wrote, were there any that felt, I guess, more exposing or even just less exposing, if that makes sense to write?
Um, I think, well, I did the bit about me at the start, but then I kind of sprinkle little bits of aspects of my life, or maybe an experience I've had, or something that I do in my life that is either helpful or unhelpful. Again, just to highlight different things for people so they might recognize that for themselves. So it didn't feel exposing, but I guess being asked that question, it's like, well, I suppose there are kind of bits of me throughout the book. So there is a level of vulnerability there, but
Mm.
I really feel okay with it. I really do feel okay with it, which isn't something I would have been able to say many years ago. I would have very much kept myself hidden and not wanting people to see any flaws or imperfections in me. And now I am who I am, and if my story can help people, then that's fantastic. And if my story doesn't help, that's fine too. But maybe there's something in the book that will be helpful for somebody.
Mm.
But yeah, it really has been an absolute joy to write the book. I don't know what I expected, but I did expect it was going to be hard just
Mm.
from the things I've heard from people. And I think across the whole process, maybe twice, possibly 3 times, I would say to my husband, okay, this bit's feeling a bit hard. And I think they were around the vulnerability piece.
Yeah.
They were around, okay, this book's got to go to the has got to go to the publisher now, and it's going to leave me, and somebody else that doesn't know me very well is going to read it. Or when it was going to the professional editor. And that was a beautiful and very validating experience because it came back with very few edits at all. I think it was like, let's shorten a few of the sentences, and there's some blend of Australian and American spelling we need to be consistent with. But generally, the content of the book was pretty much like highly complimented. And that felt very validating for me as a writer.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, that's huge.
because I love writing, and I do believe I'm a good writer. But then to hear it from a professional editor, I was like, oh, that's actually really cool. Now I'm really enjoying writing this book. Not that I need the external validation, but let's face it, we do all like it sometimes.
Well, absolutely. Totally human.
Yeah.
And I know this is your debut book, but also not your first kind of writing experience. So did you have the sense that that helped as well, that you knew writing was something you liked and something you'd done before?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I would have embarked on a book if I wasn't somebody that enjoyed writing.
Yeah.
I was excited to write it. I write regularly for a magazine, and I enjoy that.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think there was some kind of knowledge in me that you can do this.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about the actual practice of self-compassion, When you're working with people, what have you noticed tends to shift first when they start practicing compassion, including self-compassion?
Well, that's a good question. What shifts first? And again, I don't know there's a kind of generic answer to some of these because people are different. But what I do notice is often people will can feel quite confronted by how critical they're being of themselves, or even if they don't have a particularly harsh critic, it can be how much they're not paying attention to themselves or recognizing their own needs and actually meeting those needs.
Mm,
And then that leads to them being more connected to themselves, being more curious about what it is they might want, and then perhaps, making a bit more time for themselves or starting to say no to things that they don't want to do, where they've been so used to defaulting to yes.
mm.
Yeah.
That in itself is huge, hey? Mm,
Yeah.
wow. Okay. And on that note, what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about self-compassion or about compassion?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that people think compassion is some kind of soft, fluffy thing, that
Mm,
if you start being compassionate to yourself, you're going to lose your edge. You're not going to get done the things you might want to get done. Um, Perhaps if you're overly compassionate to other people, they might take advantage of you and things like that. What I think it's really important to understand is that courage is at the heart of compassion. There's not a lot that's soft about compassion. I mean, obviously, there's kindness is an aspect of this. People can think it's just about being kind,
mm,
but it really is about courage and strength and wisdom. And I think it's one of the strongest and bravest acts that you can take in your life,
mm.
both for yourself and for other people.
Yeah.
And I think we really do underestimate the power of compassion.
Mm,
And I think we live in a world where we don't have to look far to realize that if there was more compassion in the world, things would be a lot better for many, many people.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. This book could have quite the ripple effect. I'm sure it already is.
I would love that. I got very excited. I don't know if the person listens to the podcast, but I got very excited. Somebody had posted on Facebook about my book,
Mm,
and the woman commented and said that it had just arrived in India. So if you are listening, and I have reached out and messaged, but that absolutely made my day because
mm.
I kind of knew that it would end up in the UK because I've got family and friends in the UK, and you kind of expect that family and friends are going to support you.
Yeah,
And I knew
exactly.
it was going to be in America because I had sent
Mm,
some of the advanced readers were in America, and I knew there was people who bought it in America. But to hear that it's in India, that just blew my
yeah.
mind. I was like, that's amazing.
Wow. It'll be
Yeah,
being translated before you know it.
that would be awesome. And if anybody is listening and you're from somewhere outside of Australia, I'd absolutely love to hear where you're reading it. So please do feel free to reach out, send me a message, and let me know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Have you had many people reaching out or, I don't know, writing reviews or letting you know their response to the
Yeah,
book?
I think it's up to last time I checked, I think there was 15 reviews on Goodreads,
Mm,
a few on Amazon. A lot of people either can't post reviews. I know I can't post reviews on Amazon because I'm not particularly an Amazon customer. So, but Goodreads, which is a great place to go and review books,
mm.
there's quite a few on there, and I've had some people reach out and let me know that they're loving it, and people sharing on social media. So again, if you do have a copy of the book, and you're on social media and you share, please tag me because I love seeing it out in the wild. And if you send me a DM, I am not an automated bot in there. I am me, so you will get a reply from me.
Mm,
It's such a thrill, kind of. I think that's probably one of the nicest parts of the whole book process. Like it's been really fun creating it and writing it. And even the process of going through what needs to happen to bring a book to life was quite interesting. But I think the real thrill for me has been seeing people's excitement about receiving the book and hearing what people are thinking about it when they read it. And some of the reviews, well, pretty much all the reviews, to be honest, have made me quite teary. What I had hoped this book would be seems to be what people are saying it is. So that I couldn't ask for anything more. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And so, speaking of which, the women who shared their stories in the book, I was wondering what that process was like for you working with them and I guess for them as well.
Yeah, that was really beautiful, and one of the women, Maggie, she's outed herself on social media. She chose to do that, and that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
The other women I have said, I won't do that. That's not my place. If they wish to acknowledge that it's them in the book, then they can do that, but I would not do that. So I reached out to the four women. A couple of them I have worked with as clients, not in psychology. Um, and two of them are people I know in my life. And I had asked if they would be interested in sharing their story. And they all said, yes, absolutely. So we went through a process of doing an interview, and then I put together the case study. What one of the case studies wrote hers, and then I just had to adjust it a little bit for the context of the book, and of course sent it back to her for approval. But the others were interviews, and then I put together the case studies, and then they read through them and gave me approval for them. And then I asked all of them why did they want to do that? Why did they want to share their story? And all of them said very similar things, that whilst they had been going through burnout or difficult times in their life, they had had support of other people that they were really grateful for.
Mm.
And they wanted to share their stories in the hope that that would help somebody else in the world who might be going through something difficult. So, such beautiful compassion.
Yeah.
One, for themselves being able to receive the compassion to get the help and support they needed,
Mm.
their openness, their vulnerability, and their courage to put their story in the book, but also the beautiful compassion flowing out because the reason they wanted their story in the book was to help other people and to help alleviate suffering. So it's yeah, I was just thrilled. I think that
Yeah.
their stories, they made me teary when I was reading. You read your book a lot when you when you finish writing it. You read your book a lot. You got
Yeah.
to do line by line to check for spelling errors, and I'm sure there is one. I'm sure there will
I
be.
didn't see any.
Lots of eyes on the book. There's probably going to be an error, and that's fine because it's not about perfection, right?
Mm.
But when I was reading back the book, yeah, reading those stories just had me tear up every time.
Wow.
So grateful to those women.
Yeah, yeah. And like we were talking about with your kind of the personal things that you shared, just really bringing that human connection. That's so true of those women who shared as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Would you say, is there any kind of advice you'd want to give to someone who was wanting to write a book? Anything that you might, want them to know about the process or
Wow. What would I want them to know? Um, it's a bit like I did a PhD, and I was talking to somebody the other day about a PhD, and one of the things I said to them is find a topic you're passionate about because you're going to be immersed in it, whether it takes you no time at all to write or lots of time to write. You're going to be immersed in it, and then of course, when the writing ends, the you need to get the book out into the world, so the connection with your book is ongoing for a long time. So I think do something, connect with something that you're passionate about. Have people around you that are supportive of that, because like anything, when you're doing an endeavor like that, it can be quite lonely. So I think having good people around you to support you. And also, I initially got very caught up in, oh, well, if you're going to be an author of a book, you have to follow this structure and you have to mind map it like this, and then you have to do that, and then you have to sit down every day for at least 30 minutes and write X number of words. And very, very quickly I got to the point where I was like, well, yeah, that's just not how I work, so that's not going to work for me. So I think, remember, you can do it your way. Now, obviously, that's going to be different. I did hybrid publishing. If you go with a traditional publisher, then obviously the restrictions and limitations are going to be more. If you completely self-publish, you can do absolutely whatever you want. So my main thing would be pick a pathway that suits you and do it your way,
Wow. Yeah.
and seek support from others, because I didn't know a lot of the stuff about the actual book publishing process, and I also didn't want to learn all that. So I sought advice and support from the Kind Press, who were great, and that helped me not have to get too caught up in the weeds of what do you have to do to get in registered with the National Library and things like that. It's like, I don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So drawing on that expertise and support.
Yeah.
Wow, so many words of wisdom in there. Mm. So if the book could offer readers just one internal shift, what would you want that to be?
Wow. One internal shift. What's coming to mind as you ask me that is to just notice how you engage with yourself
Mm.
and do your best to soften it, even just a little, if that feels really hard. Because I think for me, going from having a very, very toxic, very hostile relationship with myself to one now that my default is compassion,
Mm.
it's just so much nicer to be with myself. I just make different decisions for my life. It just feels easier to be here.
Mm.
So I think that would probably be the main thing, is for people to also acknowledge that they really matter. Your
Mm.
needs matter just as much as somebody else's. So don't neglect yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, wow, that's really powerful, Hayley. And yeah, certainly comes through so strongly in the book, that idea of our relationship with ourselves being so central and so important.
Yeah.
Mm. So, one final question. What do you hope readers will feel when they finish your book?
Oh, what do I hope they'll feel when they finish the book? Hopeful comes to mind.
Mm.
And I really do believe that if somebody reads the book and engages in some, if not all, of the reflective exercises, listens to the meditations, that by the time they get to the end of the book, something will have changed. I honestly can't see how that can't happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, just knowing, like, my experience of nearly 2 decades as a psychologist, the work I do as a coach, if we go through these processes, change does happen.
Mm.
And it might not be like huge. For some people, there may be some really pivotal moments in there that's like, okay, this has got to change, and they may make some big leaps. But there will be change, even if it's small. I just can't see how that wouldn't happen. But I would like people to feel hopeful.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Beautiful, Hayley. Such a delight hearing about, yeah, your thoughts on the book and the process and all of those things. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you so much for coming back. You're such a beautiful interviewer. I have no doubt you'll be back on again. And thank you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this little sneak behind the scenes of the book writing and process. And I look forward to bringing you another episode next week. If you have read the book, ratings and reviews really do help with getting the old algorithms working in your favor. as do they for the podcast as well. So, as always, really appreciate if you would take a moment to do a review. And thank you for tuning in. And we'll see you again next week. Go well and go gently with yourselves. Bye.